Hey, how's it going, everyone? So we're gonna have a crazy time today. You can sit back, you can relax. You're not gonna need to take any notes. You don't even have to worry about saying, "Hey, Mike, where's your slides?" or anything like that. Now, I'm of course no amazing speaker. I'm no Martin Luther King, but what I like to think about when we're doing presentations is same thing after is great. I have a dream speech. You're not gonna be like, "Hey, could I see those slides?" And then, you go back and look, "Oh, he had a dream." So it's gonna be one of those things where it's a feeling, it's an idea. You just really have to try to wrap your head around it. We're self-reflecting, we're seeing how far we can go. So I apologize for being fast. We're gonna jam through this. We're gonna make it in time. So we're just gonna fly. So kick back, relax, and I just ask you to join the revolution with me. So feel free to take notes if you want, but really we're just thinking through this and reflecting on this year that we've all had together. So away we go. Now, of course, I don't need to talk about the pandemic at all. Obviously, the devastation, the loss, it's immeasurable, but it's still here. It's all on our minds. So that's why we're here. If you were at the panelists, awesome talk just a minute ago, they had a great intro for me because everything they're talking about, that's what we're going with in this session and even further. So here we go. Now, we're not going to do breakout rooms. I'm not going to have you guys all talk to each other and things. So getting together, that can come later. This will be your only question I'm going to ask you in the beginning. So you could throw it in the chat whenever you're ready. Just why did you choose to come to this session? So not Google Camp in general, but just this session. So go ahead if you want, you can throw that in the chat whenever you're ready. My mention of educational reform. That sounds so smart. Sounds interesting. I hope it is. Thanks, Chelsea. Learning new ideas. I may have some. We'll see. We'll see. Or as they say, there's nothing new under the sun, but hopefully I can enlighten a little bit. Reflect on lessons we've learned in the past and how to plan, how we can apply those lessons to the upcoming school year. It's exactly what I'm going for. All right. I didn't want to sit through a session about a particular tech platform. Oh, Mr. Smith, bless your heart. All right. So yeah, hopefully it'll be a little rest for you. New tech tips. All right, maybe. What else tech has done to change education? Want to see if my reality matches others. Quality. It's a historical time. You guys are just doing my presentation for me. I don't even think I have to do anything. You guys can just read the chat and I'll just be done in an hour. Reflect on how we want to move forward, to learn what others thought about last year's experience and to see and hear what I can learn to carry over for next year to inspire me for the beginning of a new school year. Take the negatives of last year and find the positives. Oh, that's the big thing today. So I think Lori might be winning right here because that's what we're doing. We're just focusing on positives all for the hour today. Title of the session. Woo, all right, Michelle, I won. What we have just experienced, true. Future of education, looking for examples, research, resources. Awesome. Numerous positive benefits, want a reflection. All right. So here we go. Thank you, team. Now, I'm going to ask you tons of pandemic hit the industry, I believe changed it forever. True. All right. So I'm going to ask you tons of questions today. And really, just like in class, a lot of them are just rhetorical questions. I mean, you could feel free to throw them in the chat if you want, but I'm going to be going so fast. You don't need to be answering the questions for the audience or for me. You're really just answering for yourself, for your career, for your school, whatever. So I want to change our educational system in our society, and I want you to be part of this change. So here come all these questions we're going to be thinking about. So, why are you a teacher? And then we're usually like, to make a change, right? So do you feel like you're being effective at that goal that you want? How are you responding to the pandemic? How have you responded to the pandemic? Remember, students are watching everything we do. So what are they learning by watching us in the pandemic? Hopefully it's something positive, right? Have you prepared your students for the future? Would your students from 2019 say that you prepared them adequately for 2020? Like when that pandemic happened, were your kids ready and they're like, oh, I got this? Now, a lot of people have said, and I'm sure you've heard it a million times, throughout this past year, who could have ever predicted 2020 would have been like this? And of course, we can all concur with that statement. But then I bring it a little further and I say, well, if our school system wasn't 20 years behind in technology, then we would have only had a small fraction of those problems that we had in 2020, right? Because if you've been coming to conferences like this, people have been saying these things since the year 2000. So we have to start thinking, all right, what can we do? What can we do? Now, we're going to have a few videos that you can watch here so you can sit back and relax. So these are just everyday teachers like you and me, just giving their thoughts and just helping spur some thoughts within yourself.
Hi there, my name is Jamie Blair and I am a third grade virtual teacher, not by choice. This year I was one of the chosen teachers to teach virtually and accommodate our families who wanted to stay home during this pandemic. And I'm not gonna lie, I kicked and cried and screamed, and I wasn't really sure I was up for this job because I am a teacher who loves being with kids, and I love being in the classrooms, and I like walking through other classrooms, and I love walking around the school, engaging with all kinds of kids, just not kids that are in my classroom. But you know what? This year I have found many benefits for staying virtually. Now, one thing that my kids and I do is we start the morning off with a positive vibe, and we have already 157 reasons why we love staying at home. And one of our favorite things about virtual school is we don't have to wear shoes to school, and that is something that we really like. So some of the benefits that I found from virtually learning at home is family time. A lot of my families get to hang out with each other, and a lot of my kids normally never see their parents, and now staying home this year and learning virtual, they get a lot more family time, and they're hanging out with their grandparents, which I just love. And again, too, seeing their daddies and mommies on a daily basis is great. Not only that, but my kids are tech savvy, okay? When I taught third grade in the classroom, Mrs. Blair, where's the power button? Okay, these kids can power up. They can, and I'm not gonna lie, I wasn't the very tech savvy person either, but this year, I got it going on, okay? I know how to do so much stuff. I never thought that I could really bond with my kids over a computer, but you know what? I dig each and every one of my students, and I'm gonna let you know, the mommy and teacher connection is huge. I have parent meetings twice a month, and at the beginning I was Zooming with my parents so much, and we were learning off each other, and I think that bond of just like crying together and going, how are we gonna do this? Really strengthened the relationship of my classroom this year. The parents and I are really working together to help their child succeed, and that is a positive. On top of, like I told you, the learning, I was thinking, how is this gonna happen? How are my kids gonna learn? But come into my classroom and you see, my kids are expert writers. They know their stuff. They are awesome and epic. And I think one of the biggest things that came a positive out of this time of learning at home is really, honestly, parents are really seeing the strengths and the weaknesses of their children. You know, a teacher at conferences would sit and go, hey, your child is really having a hard time sitting still. Oh, and they're like, oh, they're fine at home. Or, man, your child is really, they can read, but they have no idea what they're comprehending. So we need to work on those comprehension skills. And a lot of times parents would blow us off. But now, since they're the learning coaches, they are really seeing firsthand. And myself as a parent, I used to think my kids were doing a great job at school, and now I can totally see my kids' weaknesses. So this bonding of staying home all year is a year that I will never, never forget. And I hope the families and I stay connected, and I hope I get to go to their graduation when they graduate high school, because this year has been crazy. But it's been awesome too, and believe me, if a principal gave me a spot to go back to the classroom today, there's no way I could leave my cherubs in my virtual world. So I really am virtually awesome.
All right, guys. So now watching this video, which was made just like 2 months ago, you're already starting to think like, wait a second, a lot of kids are already back in the classroom. Maybe all of our schools are back in, but a lot of us haven't had time to reflect on this past year. And we have to be honest, for some students, this could have been the best year of their whole education. Like this could have been their favorite year. This could have been the year where, they came out of their shell, they learned to love school. So we have to take it from everyone's perspective, and not to be bringing bad news, but we know the pandemic's not over. We know like Delta variants, things like that. We could be back on virtual education again. They could be back at home again. So we still need to be cognizant of this, and we still need to realize that, you know, there's kids, like I said, that they're doing better with this. So how can we still continue to reach out and touch those kids, virtually, when that's where they're going to be from now on, because some will stay in that environment.
Hi there,
So
my name
whoops,
is
let's
Jamie
keep it
Blair, and
going.
I'm a third.
All right. Now, a lot of us have heard that back to normal, back to normal. So let's just do that teacher thing. Let's look at that definition. Conforming to the standard or the common type, usual, regular. And now, are these any words that you would want to describe your career? Like, are these the words that you would want your principal to put in your evaluation? Like, yes, Mr. Grotham is a standard common teacher. Like, would you want your students to describe your classroom or your teaching style in that way? Like, yeah, Mr. Grotham is regular, a regular teacher. But this is what so many people are looking for in these times, right? Like normal, they want to be back to this normal. So let's just think back to a few years. I know it's hard sometimes to, go back before these times, but remember it was all the rage to like think outside the box. But now what are teachers clamoring to do? Like to crawl back in that box, right? To get back in where they just were. So what are we looking forward to getting back to? I mean, we couldn't have forgotten this easily that we were not happy and we were complaining about education just a couple years ago, right? So that can't be something that we're all wanting to go back to. I mean, we were talking about over testing, overworked teachers, overstressed, and just over it in general, right? So when we wish for things to go back to that normal, we have to be careful what we're wishing for. The grass is not always greener. So we have to think back and remember, we were literally just on that other side of the fence complaining about the grass was greener over here, but then now we want back over there. So when we want to go back to those normal is those problems of the past that we had. So just keep thinking, just keep thinking. All right, this is a quote from a previous superintendent. We had a change in ours, but before he left, he said, we're getting ready for one-to-one. I would have never thought that would happen. And we're a huge district, 54,000 students. And so even in his vision, he couldn't see that happening now, but of course it has happened. It's happened with, most of the districts where they are one-to-one or they're very close. So, it wasn't something in their vision, even though maybe for you or I, that's something we always hoped for, we always wanted, but it's not quite there. So now we could think back, to these tragic times before, but the illustration I show here is we all remember this date, and then we all remember what changed, right? Like the airports, if we're looking at that picture on the right, and then now we have to stand in those lines, we have to wait, we have to get there so much easier, and we know that airports will never be the same, right? So we could think of it the same way. Education is never going to be the same way. It's never going to return to how it was. So I mean, probably safe to say that probably no one really likes how those airports are. There have been positive benefits like with safety and things, but do we want that same fate for our education system? So when we want to speak, we are those artists, that are holding that clay in our hands. So I don't want to be that old man griping, for the next 25 years of my career or after my career's ended, saying, what if, and sad about all those regretted opportunities. Yes, thank you, one-to-one. Yeah, it just means one computer or one device per one student. Thanks for helping out there in the chat. So see, that's a new term that we also talk about as well, because, before you're like, well, I have a couple computers, I go to the computer lab, but now when you're talking about one device per one student, and that's just going to become a normal thing. Like I always relate computers to like pencils. We would never say, oh yeah, we're a one-to-one pencil district. But then now people are saying that about computers and things, right? But eventually it's going to get to that normal where it's like, well, of course, every student has what they need for their education. All right. Now, I could make these big grandiose statements like, have we ever had a better chance for educational revolution in America than the times of now? And of course we had. I mean, we could look at Brown versus Board of Education, Mendez versus Westminster. But when we look at times of change like that, I mean, we could see how great those changes are, and those changes had to happen. But we could also say, yeah, maybe the majority of the country didn't want it, or maybe there was a minority that didn't want it that was holding on. But we know the country was not accepting of it in the beginning. But we do know teachers did it, right? Teachers helped to bring that change. Teachers were the ones to help facilitate that and make it happen. So I don't know where your fire comes from. Maybe you've been upset with education for years. Maybe it's that testing, the lack of counseling in schools, the increase in student depression or suicide in like the past decade. Maybe it's grading system. I watched a great one yesterday talking about grading, to go in standards-based grading. Great session yesterday. Homework, maybe it was a lack of student engagement. Maybe it's the political leaders. But where is it that your education passion or your problem lies? So just something we need to think about. Where is that coming from? So let's reflect back in a year. So you may say I'm crazy that we can't have it all. But people would have also said that it would be crazy that in less of the year that all of this could happen. So think all that's happened. A device in every student's hand, that one-to-one, using that device to learn a majority of the school time. Teachers, administrators, parents caring about social emotional learning and the mental well-being of students. Racism not only being recognized, but there's a push to have diversity and representation from Black, Indigenous, and people of color. Yes, just all in a few months of school. And this is just the beginning. So we must unite in the name of education and our students. So now if we look back to 5 years ago, think about how much has changed in 5 years. Like, what if your students that you just had this past year, what if they had those same skills 5 years ago? Wouldn't everyone have been like, wow, that's amazing? Like, wouldn't you as a teacher have been presenting at like this Google camp, 5 years ago, or your students are presenting at the camp? So just think, what are you most proud of that your students are doing with technology right now? Because they're obviously doing so much. And think about all the students who have thrived during the pandemic, all those success stories that are going to be coming for years on out that you're going to be hearing. Now, let's circle back to that normal statement. So I would always take my kids to Knott's Berry Farm, and they have this old schoolhouse here. My kids would love to see it. They'd love to see those little desks and things. So it was a real schoolhouse back in 1879. They got a chalkboard, desk facing the same way, a dunce cap, rules on the wall. I mean, some might say it's exactly like our classrooms were just 2 years ago, except maybe not the dunce cap, right? So how much has changed, and even in education in that last, I can't even do math, 140 years, right? So now to the title that we've been talking about here, 2020, the year that tech saved education. So when I say that, I say, think of that old schoolhouse, or we could think about the last pandemic, that we, talked about 100 years ago. Like, what did they do? Did they just say, all right, here's your packets of paper that's due in June of 2021? Or you just take a year off learning? Or, they didn't even have copy machines back then, right? So think about that technology saved us in this past year. So maybe we're not as happy with, I wish my students had learned more, or I wish I would have been able to teach them as I did in the past. But without this technology, what would have been possible, right? Because if we look back just a little bit, Chromebooks weren't even invented until June 2011. Screencastify, which many of you guys used, was in 2013. Zoom wasn't even made till 2011. Google Classroom, 2014. Google Meets, 2017, right? So just 10 years ago, if we just went one more year past, like 11 years ago, none of that would even have been possible, right? Like, seriously, what would we have done? Just that big old packet for kids, right? And dropped it off. And how much worse would that learning have been? So now we're going to go to one of my favorite movies from my past here, Back to the Future.
Hello, in here, please.
Hey, the Big M. How's it hanging, McFly?
Hey, Needles.
So,
Needles?
Did you take a look at that little business proposal of mine?
I don't know, Needles.
What are you afraid of? If this thing works, it'll solve all your financial problems.
And if it doesn't work, Needles, I could get fired. It's illegal. I mean, what if the Jits is monitoring, huh?
The chits will never find out.
Oh, God.
Come on. Stick your card in the slot and I'll handle it. Unless you want everyone in the division to think you're chicken.
Nobody calls me Chicken Needles. Nobody!
All right. Prove it.
All right, I could watch this whole movie again, but in a second, he's going to get fired. It prints out the old school printer, but we could think about this. If you don't remember these movies, the movies took place in 1985. And this, the clip we were just watching, was their version of the future from 30 years in the future. So the clip we're watching was supposed to be the year 2015. And what do we see? A big screen on the wall, talking to your boss on that big screen. And that's the life we're living in, right? So maybe we only missed it by 5 years in 2020, but they called the future pretty well, right? So now we're able to do that work from home. Students can talk to their teacher. Hopefully no one's getting fired over Zoom here, but we can see how far we are
Hello,
progressing.
in here, please.
So now, instead of that normal we might not want, let's go for that new normal we've also heard people talking about. So we always talk about success in our classroom. I know we always say things like, I want 100% of kids to know this standard, but we also know realistically, it never really happens right by the end of the school year. But think about what success you've had with, let's just say, Zoom or Google Classroom. Like seriously, don't all your kids know how to get on Zoom? Don't all your kids know how to get on Google Classroom or Canvas or Microsoft Teams, like whatever you used in class, right? And they might have come from zero knowledge the year before. And I mean, couldn't you say they've mastered it by now? And then I say, bring it further. What if we had to switch? Like, what if you couldn't use Google Classroom anymore and you had to use something brand new that just came out this year? Don't you think your students would be able to do it? Like, and how long would it take them? A few days, a week to learn it? So this is what we've been talking about for years with education and technology, where we say, we want learning, we want application, we want them to be able to, bring that further to the next level. And that's what they're doing. And now we have students who know how to email, communicate online, chat online, video chat, meet online deadlines, download work, edit work, upload work, send digitally. And again, when I say we have students, isn't it pretty much 100% of our students? And we're talking like from kindergarten on up, right? I mean, this is something we can't believe. And these are not skills that students are going to lose. And this is going to change education forever and their lives. And just know, like, you did that. I mean, no matter what your education level is, you help those students to be able to do that. And you should be so proud of that accomplishment. And when I read off all those things that they could do, like edit, upload, send work, I mean, that's things maybe their parents can't even do. That's things that you'd be able to put on a job application a couple of years ago, like, this is what I could do. And they'll be like, you're hired. We need someone like this, right? So we're talking real world skills right now, which is amazing. Now I'm going to have two quotes on the screen, and this is from one of the bosses above me in the district office here. And she said, what practices do you want to see never come back into the classroom? I mean, how amazing is this? Like, haven't we waited for quotes like this for years, like imagining leaders saying things like this? And you're like, I got a whole list here. Let me tell you, right? How many times have we fought, and many times in vain, to change things, and it never happened, right? So, I mean, a leader saying, what do we want to see getting rid of? This is awesome. So get your list ready. People, like, if your bosses haven't said it yet, if your district hasn't said it yet, they're going to say it, right? Change is coming. And then after I was blown away by her statement, she said the next statement, she said, what do you want to come to our district? So again, get that list ready, because people are ready for change. Like, their eyes are being opened. They're starting to see, like, oh man, things weren't the best before. And the time is now, because again, have times ever been better in our teaching career to make a change than right now? So now let's relax a minute, watch a few other teachers and experts talk about what they've seen in this past year.
Hello, friends at Spring Q. My name is Bill Selleck, and the one thing we are going to be keeping as a school is having events streamed whenever possible. So the one that comes to mind the most is Grandparents and Special Friends Day. We have this around Thanksgiving time, and at Hillbrook School, we used to invite every grandparent or someone prefers a special friend to come onto campus. There's like a little program, and they get to have a tour and visit the different classes. And it's a great event, and it means so much to families. We couldn't have anyone on campus, obviously, so we did it all remotely. We did a Zoom webinar, and then had a chance for students to connect with their grandparents on calls like FaceTime or Google Meet or Zoom or whatever. But just having that first part be streamed, we did that as a Zoom webinar, was so much more inclusive. We had family members from all around the world, like literally around the world. I don't use that term lightly. We literally had people from around the world join that couldn't have otherwise joined. So powerful. Such a simple shift. So we'll likely do an in-person thing when it's safe to do so again at Hillbrook. But I think keeping that online part for big events, really any big event, whenever you can do it online, it's good stuff. So,
Awesome.
friends,
So if you don't know Bill, he's a high up guy in Q, super awesome guy. All right, now we could talk about benefits at home because there's been a lot of benefits that we've seen, throughout the pandemic. So if you haven't had time, to just make a list, we don't have time right now, but just take some time of all the benefits that you've seen. So children have more time now. I mean, if you want, what I did was I made a list of all the extracurricular activities that my own 4 children at home used to do each week. And then like once I got to like 20 things, I just got tired and I was like, wow, they did a lot of stuff, right? And it's just showing like, are these all things that were beneficial to them, things they wanted to do, or were they things that were taking away from maybe more important things in life or things they see, or were they things that were causing stress? Because remember, teacher stress, wasn't that the thing that was in like every magazine, every blog just a few years ago, right? And they were talking about, take time, have self-care, sleep, exercise, don't eat out, like that kind of thing. And then the pandemic gave us all that, right? It gave us time. It gave us, because we couldn't even leave the house, right? So maybe you did have time to exercise, or you couldn't even eat out at least for a while, and different things. So we started to be able to see or maybe experience some of those things that we haven't taken time for ourselves before. So you could think about, maybe just what's one thing that you've been doing since the pandemic started, or you just gained any time during the pandemic that you don't want to lose. Like you don't want to lose it when things go back to that normal. So I know my kids, at home, their grades are doing well. They did well in school, but they like the less stress. I mean, they like the less homework. And I mean, talking to teachers out here, they loved the less homework, virtually. So why was there less virtual homework than in class time? Who knows? I mean, obviously they can't have pajamas and sip hot chocolate every day in class, like they were at home. But what are those things that the students love so much? So have that conversation with your kids, like the same conversation I'm having with you, and say, hey, students, what did you love from there that you don't want to lose anymore? And maybe you could still have that inside of your classroom. So, and as a teacher, what are the things that, we liked? Like maybe no state testing, maybe, no SATs, like kind of thing. Like so much is going to be changing on the horizon. So have that list ready of those things that you want to change or to keep the same. So let's hear from a little bit more here.
So during the quarantine, I got 2 things accomplished. The first was I ran my first half marathon ever. And the second was that I worked hard and auditioned so that I could get into grad school, and I've now been accepted. So that was my quarantine success. So during the
All right, here's a great law I learned about in quarantine, because it seems like I somehow knew it deep inside without ever knowing it was a real thing. So Parkinson's Law, work expands to fill the time available for its completion. So if you don't know about this, like for me, I would be like, all right, I have all day to lesson plan, and it would take me like 8 hours because I had 8 hours to spend. But then, the next weekend I would be like, oh no, emergency happened. I only have 1 hour to do it. And my lesson plans would still get finished. And I'll be like, how did I finish the same? What Like, how does that work, right? Like, no matter how much time we have, it just gets filled up. So same thing, we could look back and maybe like when quarantine for a minute gave us all that extra time, is all of our time filled back up? Did we fill it up with things we wanted? You know, so we have to start thinking about maybe a cost benefit analysis. Like, if we add something, are we taking something away? Because we all know this as teachers, that sometimes things just get added on, added on, added on, added on. And then do they all still get completed, right? Are we now just working more and more to complete them? And then when administrators take some off our plate, do we just fill up our plate all over again, right? So we have to start thinking about that law. So maybe for some of us, we need to start having time limits. Maybe that's something we need to put in where we say, I'm only going to work X amount of hours a week, X amount of hours each day. Who knows? I heard some people saying they love to have office hours. That was something new. So maybe if they add that, maybe something else is going to get taken away. So we have to keep thinking about what matters to us most. Now, when I say questions, I'm going to just throw a ton of questions at you and you just keep thinking and just see if anything hits you here. So what do you want to fill your life with? Like, a lot of us can be destructive. I mean, I give blood when I can because I get all woozy, right? But there's like laws, right? Like you can only donate like I think every 56 days. And then why, right? Because it's a good thing. But if we did it too much, we would eventually die, right? So something good could turn into something bad. We could hurt ourselves. So they have to make laws against it. So do we have time limits for ourselves? So maybe what would be a fair time to stop work every day? You know, are we happy? Are we content right now with our job, with what's happening? You know, what's our purpose? Like what we talked about in the beginning. And are we going to be happy if we're not fulfilling that purpose? Are we being ourselves? You know, who are we meant to be? What needs to be changed so that you can be that person that you want to be? What do I have to give to other people, to students, to my school? What are we measuring ourselves up against? Are we measuring ourselves up against a standard we shouldn't be? You know, who knows? So, you know, maybe technology, and you're like, have we even talked about technology yet? I mean, right? But maybe technology is just a word that's a synonym for risk or growth or opportunity or hope. Because when I see all you guys at the conference, I come to this conference too because I love hearing everyone. But just like we saw in the chat, I don't want to just learn about another new tech tool, right? It's because I know that people that come to these conferences, they want risk, growth, opportunity, change. So when we say it's a technology conference, we're not just coming to learn technology, right? We know those are the people that want to change education and want to do something different, something better for our students. So I know you teachers are the ones who will use technology and you're willing to take those risks in your classroom. So you're willing to go against the grain, make your own path, change, see what's possible, opportunity, growth in everything you encounter. So then I could continue with one last question before we move on. What's one thing you'd like every student to leave your class knowing or to have done? And I know sometimes our administrators say that, right? Like, what's one standard your students have to know before they leave? But maybe it's not a standard, right? Like maybe it's something else. So maybe it's you want your students to know compassion or problem solving or something else that's not on a state test, right? Now, we've seen a lot of misinformation within the pandemic. I'm not here to cause any problems or anything else, but when I was doing my research, I did find one awesome thing. Now, remember I said suicide rates have been going up for the past decade, and hopefully we've all known that, you know, it's something awful. But when they started looking at numbers during the pandemic, they stayed the same or went down. There was decrease, you know, in visits for the emergency room. And we're like, wait, but everyone was saying, you know, suicides went up. Well, people were saying that, right? But the numbers weren't there. So we're not saying bad things still aren't happening. I'm not saying don't look out for your students. We have to look out for them, and we have to look out even more. But we found suicide rates are down, but risk factors are up. So it's awesome. Rates went down, but now we have to look for those factors. We have to be aware of our students. And it's great now that administrators, counselors, teachers are focusing on that SEL, social emotional learning, that we, you know, we have a need for counselors and that we see things. So it's great to see these articles. Teens did surprisingly well in quarantine. And we have to start realizing, well, what are the reasons things are went down? Is it because they had more sleep, more family time, less stress, less homework? I mean, who knows? So maybe we're not going to know those answers, but we always have to be looking out, and we always have to see. So children reported feeling less anxious during the months of the pandemic lockdown than they did previously. I mean, how sad is that, right? They were locked down, but they feel less stressed than when they're not locked down, right? I mean, that says something about us as a society, right? When asked to name one thing they liked about lockdown, they said their top response was time with their families. So what was that saying? They weren't getting enough of it before, right? So we need to be looking on that. Increased time together appears to have helped children see how much their parents truly cared for them. So, I mean, that's some quality stuff and things, I myself have to look at as an adult. All right. So, okay. Oh, it's okay. 2020 tech saved education, it's a hero. Yeah. Right. So now what, right? So we need to see the worth that ed tech philosophy possesses. And we have to show others that. So benefits in education. We heard a lot from people. We'll hear a few more in a little bit. But just think in 2019, if someone has said the words, yeah, this time next year, every child, every level of education from TK to 12, and they're like, no, wait about it. Wait. No, all the way through college, they're gonna, be using a device for the majority of their learning. They'll all have access from home. Yes, every teacher will be teaching students that way. I mean, no one would have believed them, right? But now it's happened. And of course, teachers are amazing. They always step up to the challenge, but students are just as amazing, right? Like every student did it. They were able to do it. You grew so much. And for me, being like a tech using teacher, for as long as I've been a teacher, I mean, like 18 years, the things that you teachers have done is just so amazing because I've been trying to learn for 18 years. And I mean, you guys pretty much got like 18 years of education in like 1 year. I mean, it's amazing. And students too. I mean, they've stepped it up so much. I mean, just hats off to everyone. It's so amazing. So, without the pandemic, let's be honest, how long would it have taken for teachers to get to that position they're in now? Would it ever have happened? I mean, honestly, like same thing with students. How long would it have taken students? I mean, I remember the big thing in education was let's get to the 21st century, right? Like 21st century learning. And then I remember because we got to the 21st century and I'm like, but we haven't got to 21st century learning. It looks just like, 20th century learning, like nothing had seemed to have changed, right? So you've done so much, there's so much that can be done. And really it's just being open. So yeah, everyone can use Google Classroom. And I mean, that's something that's amazing, but just know like you people that are here right now, like you cool Google Camp people, like those are the only people that could use Google Classroom before, like only if you had went to one of these cool conferences, and now everyone can, like they're all at this cool, like nerdy level, which is awesome because I'm a nerd. And the average teacher today would have been a rock star like 5 years ago in 2016. And when I say rock star, like ed tech rock star, like the skills you're using now would have been, unheard of before 5 years ago, right? And now everyone is doing it, which is simply awesome because you've gained all of that. So let's watch a little more, get a little more inspired before we're done here.
Hey, yo, what is up, everybody? My name is Mike Earnshaw. I am an elementary school principal in Lansing, Illinois. I am an EduMatch author. I got a book coming out, the Educulture Cookbook, Recipes and Dishes to Transform Classroom and School Culture, coming out hopefully early summer 2021. It's for educators and school leaders and paraprofessionals and everybody. And I'm also co-host of the Punk Rock Classrooms podcast with my brother, Josh Buckley. One of the tenets of punk rock is unity, and we talk about that a lot, and I've seen so much unity amongst staff, amongst families in the school, amongst school to school, and that's something that we cannot lose. When this pandemic hit and we all had to switch to virtual teaching, hybrid teaching, whatever type of teaching you were doing, it forced us to just drop those egos and say, look, I don't know what to do. I don't know what I'm doing here. You seem to have a really good grasp on, connecting with your kids through Zoom. What do you do? How have you done that? Or maybe you are a master at making, these short videos for your kids to do almost like a flipped classroom style when they're doing their asynchronous work. Show me how you did that. And I've seen educators and families and students just all come together. There was no top-down principal, teacher, paraprofessional. It was more a linear, line, a horizontal line where we're all working together to make the best possible education for our kids. And that's what we can't lose. We can't put those walls back up. We can't shut our classroom door and just do our own thing. We need to rely on each other because we are all so much stronger together. So I'm looking forward to the future, and you know what? We'll see you at the show. Hey, yo, what is up?
Sorry, I misspelled the name there. So Mike Earnshaw for the chat there. All right, a couple more here, quick ones.
Hi. Two things I've learned during this is that I love the sense of family I have with my families. They've come in my home on a daily basis. I've been in their homes, and I feel like that connection has really been super helpful this year. Also, I've learned that not everything has to be paper pencil. I can do tests online and just do practice in person with them. So those are some things I've really loved about all of this. Hi.
Wow. So it's been more than a year since the beginning of the pandemic, and so much has changed. Before the pandemic happened, I thought it was moving super fast. I was traveling so much. I was spending so much time with work. I didn't have enough time to take care of myself, to take care of my family. During this time of pandemic, I took a key phrase from Ferris Bueller because he said, life moves around too fast every once in a while, and if you don't stop, you're going to miss it. I decided during this time to stop, to really focus in on what I was doing. I took this time to build community. I took this time to redefine myself. In the past year and a few days since the pandemic happened, I have lost 100 pounds. Because I've had to be presenting via Zoom, I couldn't read the faces in the room, so I had to really rely on connecting with my audience, asking questions, seeing their answers, and changing my presentation style to meet their needs, just like teachers all across this great nation had to do with their students. I have become a better person during this time. So even though we've been apart, I think I've connected a lot more.
This pushed our district to go one-to-one. The fact that I can now say, take out a laptop and open a Google Doc is about as ubiquitous as Pear Deck and Jamboard, applications that help make the learning a little more engaging. And then finally, I think for students, I've asked a bunch of kids, what they think if they had to find some positives, and a lot of them say that having time at home with their family has been of real value. In fact, I asked my students, how do you stay positive during the pandemic? And this is what they told me.
I stay positive during the pandemic by playing my ukulele.
I stay positive during the pandemic by playing video games.
I stay positive during the pandemic by baking.
I stay positive during the pandemic by making anime edits.
I stay positive during COVID by
I stay positive during the pandemic by styling my hair in different ways.
I stay positive by playing with my chickens.
I stay positive during the pandemic by playing soccer.
I stay positive during the pandemic by making figures.
One of the things I do to stay positive during quarantine is to make YouTube videos. Oh.
All right. So I could say, hey, list all that you've learned in tech since March of 2020. But then let's be honest, I mean, wouldn't you be listening forever because you've learned so much? So, I mean, take some time to really reflect and think about how much you've learned. And I mean, it's astounding. Have you ever had another year like that in your career? And same with PD, the amount of PD you've had. I mean, just in Google Camp alone, if you heard yesterday in the keynote when they were talking about it, 67 different sessions that we have this year, you know, new record here. And just some reflections. So my own mother, bless her heart, she's in her 70s and she Zooms me one day. I mean, which should be good enough, right? Like she's Zooming to get help, but she's like, shouldn't I be using force copy on my Google form? And the next time we Zoom together, let's run through Pear Deck. I mean, how cool is that? That, you know, the learning spans all ages, spans all people. We see from students to teachers that it's there and it's possible and we can all do it. So in this future, the time has changed for students. I mean, no more lost work, right? It's all on the computer. It's accessible anywhere. They can collaborate online with their fellow students. Parents can see their work anytime. There's parent involvement. No more surprise report cards, less parent problems, rethinking grading, rethinking parent conferences, back to school night, open house, career day, right? All those can now be transformed. Having true PLN, PLC meetings, however you talk about it, right? Where you're getting people at your level or what you need. Admin having new ways to do things, staff meetings, you know, Zoom, recording, you doing PD sessions like this. I mean, hey, we're all able to just sit and relax wherever we are, right? Being paperless. I mean, there is so much that has changed and that we can see those benefits and use them to help continuing. So of course, 2020 is going down in history and we're the writers of that history. So just think about this time is going to be written in history books, in documentaries. It's going to be talked about for generations where they're going to be like, hey, Grandpa Mike, tell me about what this was like, really? You know, so history is being written. We didn't choose this pandemic, but we get to choose our role in it. So what do we want to be written on those pages? What will people remember us for? What do we want them to remember us for? So oftentimes in life, we regret a missed opportunity. Happens to me all the time. So sometimes we just don't see an opportunity present itself. So then really, what does opportunity look like? And we need to be looking for that opportunity. And I'm here to say, the time is opportunity. So we can think about all that's happened in this past year. And all these people, they were all students that sat in our desks or the desks of our neighbor classroom teachers, right? We shape lives, we inspire, we change life. Every person in the United States has either had a teacher or will have a teacher. Wait a second, they'll have 43 teachers. I did the math going through high school, right? So who else besides parents could have more impact on those teachers, children, society as a whole? And we know that's us, right? Because we're an unstoppable force. And we see the things that can be done and the things that students, young people can do. So we have a choice. Like, are we going to say, I just want to go back to the way things were. I'm going to try to make my class get back there, right? Or are we going to say, society's changed, students have changed, I've seen the needs, I've seen how ed tech can positively impact students. I'm going to work towards meeting the needs of my students and help them discover and use their talents to make the world a better place. So, I mean, there's more options than that, but to put it in black and white. So, you know, now what are we going to do? What concerns do we have to work on? Setting limits, self-care, learning how to say yes, learning how to say no, giving yourself grace. One of my favorite things to do. And since the pandemic's still going, we can still say it. I just say, dude, we're in a pandemic, right? So if something happens, that's your excuse for everything, right? Like, dude, we're in a pandemic. So make your own little catchphrase to give yourself grace. Let your students have grace. So do we need to reassess our expectations? What do we need to let go of right now so we can all adjust? So can you turn that disappointment that you've had in the past year into joy and something to celebrate each day? So 2020 was the year that tech saved education. So now 2021 is the beginning of an educational revolution. So for years, we've been asking for that change, and now's the time. So education's been altered forever. So good or bad, education is never going to be like it was. So it's on that tipping point, and it's our choice as teachers and a society from where it goes. So do we want to go back to normal? So do we want repair, or do we want revolution? So it's up to you. I could be wrong. Hey, who knows? But one last video, then I'll put a challenge for you and we are out.
Don't you realize? The next time you see Sky, it'll be over another town. The next time you take a test, it'll be in some other school. Our parents, they want the best of stuff for us. But right now they gotta do what's right for them. 'Cause it's their time. Their time. Up there. Down here, it's our time. It's our time down here. That's all over the second we ride up Troy's bucket.
All right, so that could be a metaphor, like what is Troy's bucket that we're going to ride up in, right? So this is our time. Things are going to be different. So I'm just saying, network. You have so many awesome people just right here in this meeting. So go ahead, talk to them, meet them. If you don't have a time to talk and meet them, I just made this little tiny URL, tinyurl.com/2021 Google Camp, capital G, capital C. All that's going to take you is just to a website that just has a form. So on that form, you can see the results at the bottom. So if you need people, you could put your name on there, your email, your Twitter contacts, cool podcasts you listen to, great websites you go to, because some of us sitting in these rooms today have never been to a conference like this before. This is our first time stepping out. We may feel like, newbies, first year teachers. So this is a way to connect. So if you feel comfortable putting your information out there, you could use this as a way to find those other cool teachers, to find a way to connect with people and talk. So you don't have to use this way, but I'm challenging you, keep connecting with those teachers. Sorry for the extra few minutes. You guys are super awesome. You know that. Thanks for all you do. Continue to be awesome. I'm here for you guys whenever you need me. So I'll put this link in the chat. Thanks, guys. You're awesome.